Now, there's a heavy police presence and many businesses and offices have shut down in major cities across Zimbabwe. I'm joined now by economist and former Member of Parliament, Eddie Cross, who joins us now. Eddie, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it, Mr. Cross. Why don't you just share what you're seeing when it comes to these protests? And is it actually an active protest, or is this just quiet protests that we're ultimately seeing?
I think that's a very key question. I did not expect any particular problems today. I was told by people in the townships and friends that today was likely to be a non-event. And I was very surprised when I got up, went to my office this morning and found nobody there. And the place, the whole city in Harare, completely shut down. And it really was quite bizarre. The city was silent. But it was talking loud. And I hope that the president was listening. Because I think what people were saying is, look, we sympathize with the situation, with the position of the war veterans.
Yep.
We sympathize that corruption has simply got out of control. We sympathize with the fact that our economy is not performing and that we have major economic, structural, and political problems. And all of these things need to be tackled. And I think people just simply said, right, we'll stay at home. And it was a very effective move. There were problems in Harare. We had a handful of demonstrators demonstrate in the center of Harare. They were quickly dealt with by the police, who outnumbered them at least 10 to 1. In Bulawayo, there was a bigger demonstration, but again, it was peaceful, non-violent, and I think the authorities simply let it go on, and then it faded away.
Mr. Cross, they often say that people. Yeah, please continue.
Yep. Now, I was going to say the principal issue at stake here is succession.
Yeah.
The president has made it very, very clear, personally and politically here, that he's stepping down in 28. And I have no doubt that that is the case. He is going to step down at the end of his second term. And that being the case, the party has a real problem on its hands. It has to decide on a candidate who will then run in 2028 on behalf of the ruling party. And there are a lot of conflicting interests.
Yeah.
The main thing is that the old guard, led by Chiwenga and what I call the old army, would like to be in a position to dictate who's going to take Emmerson's place, because they're very concerned about protection, protection of their interests, protection of them personally. They've all been guilty of various misdemeanors, some of them quite large. And they want to retain the present situation of patronage and rent-seeking in government.
Mr. Cross.
And the danger is that a new generation of leadership is going to be elected. Look at Mozambique, look at Zambia, look at Botswana. All new leaders from the next generation. And they're afraid that if that happens here, the present system of patronage and protection will be dismantled. And they really are fearful of that.
Is this then also, because the other cry, it seems, from people is not just that the President Emmerson Mnangagwa relinquish his spot as his term ends in 2028, but ultimately that he hasn't done anything since his arrival as president from that military coup then in 2017. And so he should actually be stepping down right now. And I want to know whether this has almost been effective in sending that message across. They often say silence can be deafening. Is that the case, you think, with this?
Not at all. Not at all. There's absolutely no threat to Emmerson's presidency at all at the present time. He's totally in control. And I think that the people who are demanding that he step down immediately are simply those who are afraid of the future. And the fact that they're claiming that he's done nothing, in fact, is simply not true. He has, in fact, implemented many reforms which have corrected many of the ills of the Mugabe era. Mugabe was president for 37 years. We were a one-party state, ruled by a ruthless dictator who brooked no opposition at all. Today, we're a relatively free society. We've got relatively free media, and the economy is growing quite rapidly. During the Mugabe era, 5 million Zimbabweans left Zimbabwe because they couldn't survive here. I mean, in 2008, we had 150,000 cases of cholera in Harare. We had 78% of our population on food aid. We had 5 million people leave the country. You know that in South Africa because several million of those people went to South Africa, where they live today. And Emmerson has stopped all of that. In fact, we have young people coming back to the country now. And it's a real delight to see these young people, second, third generation Zimbabweans, who knew nothing of the liberation war, coming home and getting stuck into the economy. It's really quite exciting.
So where do these protests, or even if they're silent and people stayed away then today, clearly, where does that protest then come from? Where does this idea of people wanting Emmerson Mnangagwa to step down, that he hasn't done enough for the economy? Because if you've laid out what you've set out, if what you've laid out is ultimately true, then people are ultimately saying that actually, no, it's not in this case then. So where does this stem from? Where does that other side of the coin stem from, you think?
People have very short memories. And there's no comparison, Zimbabwe 2025 with Zimbabwe in 2017. Absolutely no comparison whatsoever. It's a different country. The problem is that he's not been able to tackle some of the most fundamental problems we have. For example, we are still effectively dollarized. That makes us uncompetitive in the region. He has not tackled corruption. In fact, there's lots of evidence that his own family is deeply corrupt, that some of his children are engaged in criminal activity on a large scale. And he's not tackled that. And I think if he would tackle a few of those, I mean, the amount of money being stolen here is just enormous. It probably exceeds our national budget. And if he doesn't get on top of that, the dissatisfaction with his regime is going to continue, maybe even deepen. But I know better than anybody, because I was in the opposition for 17 years. I know that taking power in Zimbabwe is not a straightforward issue.
Yeah.
This regime is in power, and they are capable of defending their hold on power very effectively, as the opposition has discovered in the last 2 years. I don't see any chance of any regime change here.
Yeah. Money stolen exceeding the budget, possibly. That's enough to surely get you to step down or even be fired, surely, under normal circumstances.
I had a lovely chat with the new French ambassador here the other day, and he's just come from Moscow. And he said to me, Eddie, Harare is just like Moscow. One very tough guy in charge, and he's absolutely unchallenged, and the oligarchs running the country. And, he said, Harare feels just like that. And it's just, where we are today. And it can change in 5 minutes. We've seen that. We've seen what happens when the government here is really challenged to change its ways. They can change the situation here very quickly. I mean, they did that in 2009. 1 minute we were a failed state, and the next minute we were back on our feet and growing rapidly. And our problems can be resolved. Our fundamentals are sound. We have a growing economy. Our exports are bigger than our imports, but we have structural problems, and those must be attended to. That takes political courage. It takes strong men, and I believe we can do it. But the people angry with the fact that change is simply not coming fast enough. Today, they spoke with a very loud voice, with their silence.
So Is Emmerson Mnangagwa the right person to lead the country in the direction that you just speak of? Being able to change the country and turn it around, even if it's not just over the next 3 years until his term is meant to end, but even into the future?
Remember, this guy has been in the struggle for independence since he was 16 years old. You know, this guy has devoted his entire life to the change and political transformation of Zimbabwe from a colonial state to what we are today. And he's 86 odd years. He's older than me, slightly older than me. I tell you, it's difficult for us to change. We're part of a generation that has failed our country. I don't believe that there's any threat to his presidency. I think he will finish his presidency in 28. And I think the key to the future holds on who he chooses to take his place as the next president of Zimbabwe. I'm watching Mozambique with fascination. Chapo did not get a majority in the elections recently, but he's been made president by the ruling party. And the first thing he's done is to talk to the opposition.
Yeah.
And he recognizes now that he's got to rebuild the ruling party from the ground up. And he's the first president post-independence generation.
Yeah.
He was born after the end of the Liberation War.
Yeah.
And he's a lawyer. He's a professional.
I hear you. Mr. Cross.
He's a very fine guy.
Just as a final question, I only have 10 seconds, unfortunately. Do you see more protests happening then in Zimbabwe post this?
No.
Thank you so much for your time.
No, not a chance. Okay, thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Eddie Cross, the economist, but also a former member of parliament then on the opposition benches in Zimbabwe for around 17 years there, joining us for those protest discussions then out of Harare, as well as the rest of the country then. Zimbabwe's leader facing calls for his removal, even within his own party, possibly.